This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everyone. So this will definitely be different for me. My class is very interactive, and I tend to be all over the room when I'm teaching, so teaching from the desk today. But if I'm going to teach about safety, I have to follow what I preach and not encourage you all to drive today, not knowing where you're coming from and what kind of conditions the roads are in. So I want to start today with a story, and this is an article by Harvey Mackey called Help Each Other Out. So down on the farm, a mouse peeked through a crack in the wall and saw the farmer's wife open a small package. Thinking at first it might be a tasty treat, the mouse grew very concerned when he realized that it was a mouse trap. The mouse immediately took to the farmyard, warned all the other animals, "There's a mouse trap in the house." But the response he got was not encouraging. The hen clucked, raised her head, and said, "It's not my problem. Mouse traps are of no concern to me." The pig was no more helpful. "I'm sorry to hear that, but all I can do is hope that you don't get caught in it. I hope that helps." The cow was unsympathetic. "I am powerless over a mousetrap. It's really no big deal as far as I'm concerned." The mouse was very hungry by this time and returned to his hole in the wall to wait for the farmer and his wife to go to sleep. Finally, when it was very dark, he ventured out in search of some cheese. The sound of the mousetrap catching its prey awakened everyone. The farmer's wife rushed out to see what was in the trap. What happened next surprised everyone. In the dark, she did not see the venomous snake that had entered the house looking for a mouse dinner. But the snake's tail got caught in the trap and the snake bit her. The farmer rushed her to the hospital, but when she came home, she still had a fever. Figuring that chicken soup would be a good remedy for the fever, the farmer sacrificed the chicken for the soup. But her condition didn't improve, and friends and neighbors came to sit with her around the clock so the farmer could tend to his crops and animals. In order to feed them all, the farmer butchered the pig. Even so, the wife did not survive the fever. So many people came to her funeral that the farmer had to slaughter the cow to provide meat for the luncheon. And the mouse watched these events unfold with great sadness from his little hole in the wall because all the friends had ignored the warning. Harvey Mackey's story talks about how things happen. Phone lines and websites crash and can shut down an operation in a hurry, even if our census is up and staff are performing at their best. A snowstorm, hurricane, floods will halt the most efficient, best run business unless contingency plans are in place. So the best thing to ask yourself, what could go wrong? What can make our best laid plans fall apart? What would be the worst case scenario? And how do we respond to it? So Harvey Mackey says, be prepared or be prepared to fail, which leads us to emergency preparedness. I'm Vanessa Neal. I am the executive director at University Village. I've been here 36 years and been teaching this class for, I don't know, 10 plus, 12, 13 years. I really don't remember. But we're going to start with emergency preparedness this morning. As you can imagine, this portion of my class has changed tremendously over the years as the regulations have changed and new things come upon us. There is a wonderful model plan available, and I have given you the URL there at the health department. You go to this model plan and you enter your own information to make it specific to your home. But this way you do not have to reinvent the wheel, and it meets all the criteria which is required by the regulations. Having an emergency preparedness plan is required for nursing homes, assisted living, ICF facilities, even residential care. One of the requirements is that you must coordinate with your local emergency management officials. And I encourage you to invite your fire department to come when there's not a crisis and tour your building with you. Talk to the fire department about what is your emergency plan, whether it's tornado or fire, so that when they come, they're on your team. They already know what you've been doing, what you expect of them. Obviously, they take over when they get there, but for everybody to be on the same page is so important. Your plan must be on file with your local emergency management. I've given you the site there of where you can go to find out who is the director of your county. The final rule saying we had to have an emergency plan actually was implemented in 2017. If you are a home that receives federal funds, having this emergency plan is required as part of conditions of participation or conditions for coverage. I'm not sure what that was. Appendix Z is where you can find the regulations related to emergency preparedness. All right. When surveyors come to your building, they are going to ask you for a copy of your plan. They want to see your plan. They also will ask to see proof that you have been training your employees. So obviously when they first come on, so your new employee orientation needs to include training of your plan, and then you must review it with your staff at least annually. So we split it up. Obviously here in Tulsa, we have threats of tornadoes. Obviously fires applies to anyone. Depending on where you are located in the state, maybe you deal with floods, maybe you deal with wildfires. Whatever your situation is, you need to be reviewing those parts of your plan with your staff. The surveyors will go to your staff and say, what are you going to do if there's a fire in the building? They want to know that they have the answers. The staff need to know the basics so that obviously they can implement the plan in place until you can get to the building, because Murphy's Law, most things happen when we're not here. The state will want to see that you have done a risk assessment, and we'll go over that today. You need to figure out whether or not, depending on the emergency, are you going to evacuate your home or are you going to shelter in place? And of course, that's going to depend on the weather, the time of day. Past emergencies at different homes have proven that evacuating can cause more injuries. If at all possible, it's always best to shelter in place if you're able to. Your emergency preparedness plan must have 4 provisions. So risk assessment and planning, we'll go over that first. Your policies and procedures, a communication plan, and then the training and the testing. So you want to take an all hazards approach. So it's an integrated approach. So you're going to look at what is my capacity here at my facility and what capabilities do I have based on the staff that I have, and et cetera. We're going to look at internal emergencies, man-made emergencies, natural disasters, and that of course is specific to your location as mentioned. So your risk assessment, you're going to look at your home head to toe, assess and document what are the potential hazards likely to impact their geographical region, your community, the facility, obviously our resident population, and then figure out where are the gaps. What are we really not prepared for at this point? And so all that goes into your risk assessment. Must be comprehensive. You must create what they call an HVA, a hazard vulnerability assessment, which I will send you. Let me do that right now. Let me see if I can pop that up. Nope. Get back up there. There is a wonderful hazard risk assessment, which I will see if I can. I will put that into the chat during the break. All right. Okay, so let's talk about fire. You want to know what type of building construction do you have? What's the size of your building? Obviously, how many stories do you have? Think about your residents. What time? If the fire occurs at night, what are your risks and your gaps versus if it happens on the weekend, if it happens during the day? How many staff are on? What training have you done? What training do we still need to do? What resources are available? If you live in a rural community and the fire department is not close, you know, what do you have in place for fire protection? your fire separations and the firewalls, do all your staff know what a 2-hour wall is? What does that mean? Do they realize that if they would just move the residents onto the other side of a firewall, you're protected for 2 hours, up to 2 hours? Making sure they know where all the fire extinguishers are. Oftentimes I will ask them, just go up to them and just kind of randomly say, where's the closest fire extinguisher? It just forces them to kind of keep that in the top of their mind. Training and testing. So you must do a facility-based training, looking at that all hazards approach. So obviously specific to what happens at your place, whether you're rural or in a large metropolitan area. And then having a full-scale exercise. In a full-scale exercise, you want to actually be walking through the whole thing. Invite your firemen to come, or your emergency management folks would love to come to your community and help you out with a drill, and having those people involved and getting their feedback and assistance to guide you through a full-scale drill. Whether you your drill is that you're going to have this mock tornado hit your building, and we actually go through physically transferring residents over to another community that's close by, and it forces that community to go through their process of accepting the resident, and are they going to be able to take care of them? We can't just take them over there and dump them. We need to make sure that we're providing what that resident needs, whether it's oxygen and oxygen supplies and other things. We can't assume that that other community has enough supplies to take care of these residents that we're bringing. So we go through that actual process, and just makes it, if it ever happens, they're a little more comfortable and we know what to do. You are required to have at least one full-scale exercise a year, and then you can do tabletop exercises as well, where you sit down and you completely with the team and have an interdisciplinary team present, have an aide present, have a med aide present, have somebody from housekeeping there, and you go through this tabletop exercise and you talk about, okay, a fire occurred on this hallway, what are we going to do? And everybody knows their job and what their task is. One of the things that I do when I present the class in person is that I pass around pages from our emergency preparedness plan, which came from that model that the health department provides. And there is one sheet for every discipline. So literally, I'm able to hand a sheet to the dining person and say, here, and it has a checklist of everything they should be doing. And I hand a sheet to the medical records person, and then they have this checklist of what to do. I hand a sheet to the security guard or whoever, but all these people on the interdisciplinary team, so that they can go through that checklist and make sure they're prepared and ready to do all those things that are listed. Think about what needs to go with that resident if you are evacuating. What needs to be in this packet that you create, and so that there is information, so that one, the facility, we obviously have to always observe HIPAA. So we, with this community that we do this practice with, we signed confidentiality agreements with them. They signed one, just so that we're passing information on. We gave them remote access temporarily to our medical records, so that they could see what we see on these residents, and they're better able to care for them. If you have questions as I go, please do put them in the chat and we'll bring them up and we'll go over them. Use of volunteers. If you are in a rural community, I encourage use of volunteers. Sometimes it's all hands on deck, and it takes a lot of people to make things go smoothly. If you're going to have volunteers, again, make sure that they don't ever do anything that's outside of their scope of practice and training. Include them with some of your training. Have them sign off. Have them sign a confidentiality form. Just make sure that they don't come in and they're in the way. There's lots of non-medical tasks that can be performed, helping push somebody to another area that's in a safe place, or providing a blanket, getting somebody something to drink. So all these different things that someone could be doing so that you could focus on what you need to do and your nurses can focus on what they need to do. Your policies and procedures, which we'll talk about, have to go over how you're coordinating everything and making sure that if an emergency occurs at night, who's in charge until you get there? Sometimes it's not always the RN on duty. You may have an LPN or a med aide who is just fantastic and keeps a calm head and is just very resourceful and might be the best person until you get there. All right, so we're going to talk about evacuation first. Prior to any disaster, you want to hazard hunt. And this goes back to your risk assessment and planning. Walk the building, look for things like, if I had to evacuate quickly, would that be in the way? Would that be an obstacle? Could that cause a problem? Is something sticking out too far in the hallway? Is it possible that the pictures on the walls, they are not secure, and so somebody could get hurt, a picture fall down and hit someone? You have to go, you look all the way up, you look all the way down, and just make sure you're looking at everything to make sure that things are not going to create more problem when you already have a disaster going on. You always want to know who's in your building. Typically, we can run out a report of who's clocked in for most of us, so you'll know what staff are here. But what about visitors? What about people who come in from hospice? If, like in my particular building, we have our assisted living and our nursing home all under the same roof. And so we have a lot of home health people that come in on the assisted living side. We actually have sign-in sheets. So when anyone comes in the building, they sign their name and who they are here to see. That way we can keep up with who's in the building, so we make sure that we evacuate everyone. The same way with the family members. The family members have to sign in as well and who they're here to see. Decide in advance who has authority. We talked about that. So who is that person who's going to be making decisions until the firemen are on campus, or the administrator or the DON, or however you decide has authority. Choose employees who are able to make smart safety decisions. And then always train others as backup. I mentioned Murphy's Law, but it's true, things are going to happen when, maybe those people are not there. Obviously, we want to make sure that we're documenting, distributing, and practicing those evacuation procedures. In assisted living, regulation says that the fire marshal, so they don't go through a life safety code inspection, the fire marshal comes in for them. So the fire marshal has a right to come in and force you to do an evacuation drill. So we drill it with the residents so that, again, it's familiar to them, it's familiar to the staff. The more you practice, the more it's going to come natural. But with evacuation procedures, same thing. In the nursing home, you want to practice it. If you had to evacuate your residents to another facility, how are you going to get there? If something happens like a tornado, it's very possible that one route may not be available. There's trees across the road, or vehicles that were thrown, or whatever could happen in a tornado. So always having two different routes to get to the same place is smart. Thinking about things outside the box, but again, this is that looking at the whole big picture. If there were issues of having ice on the road, carrying sand in a tub in your vehicle, or they make these boards that you could put under tires or things like that, or having chains that could quickly be thrown on your vehicle's tires. How are you going to keep track of who went where when you are evacuating? Whether it's a transfer board or something, but think in advance about who's going to be the person who's documenting that. Mrs. Smith went to this facility and Mr. Jones went to that facility. Somebody has to keep track of that, because you certainly want to be able to tell the family members, where their loved one went. Make copies of your building and have those available to hand to the fire department or whoever might come to help assist you in your evacuation. Always keep copies of your plan. and have them in your emergency supply kit. We'll talk about that more later. 2 ways out of the building. Again, this is something that you want to tell the staff just to keep in the back of their mind at all times. If I can't go this way, how else can I get out of the building? Evacuation priorities. So you want to evacuate your ambulatory residents first. That just helps clear the way so that you can then more quickly then go to helping those folks who are in a wheelchair. And then lastly, we help those that need full assistance. Transferring people who are in a bed all the time, transferring them into a Broda chair is going to help you get them out so much more quicker. There are things like evacu-sleds, using sheets. If you have more than one floor, you want to first evacuate horizontally, then vertically. And are there any residents who could go home with their family member? That's one less bed you have to find in another facility. So think about that as well. How much is each resident going to take with them? You want to be able to know that when they get to that other place, that it's a smooth transition for that resident and it's almost seamless for them. So having this pillowcase where you are quickly throwing in things like their dentures, their hearing aids, maybe it's oxygen tubing, but be sure they have their glasses and their dentures, their hearing aids. Those things are so important. They get over to that other place. If they can't see, how frustrating for them. They're already a little traumatized by having being moved quickly, to another place. Plus, they may have witnessed whether it's the tornado or things happening. So they need their eyeglasses. They've got to have their hearing aids, and they definitely need their dentures. How are you going to transport your medical records if you still have some paper charts for whatever reason? How are you going to transfer your medications? So fortunately, med carts roll, but thinking about things like contacting a local bread company or UPS, and would they be able to send someone who could transport your medication carts over to that other community where you sent your residents? How are you going to transfer concentrators? Again, just thinking about that ahead of time. When you transport your residents, you don't want to transport oxygen and residents at the same time. If you can avoid it, obviously, other than the oxygen that they're wearing. Being sure you have thickener. You can't assume that other community has extra thickener. And if you have a resident who needs it in order to not aspirate, be sure you have that. What about refrigerated meds? How are you going to keep those refrigerated meds cold while you're doing this whole process? Of course, informing caregivers where you took their loved one. One of the requirements for emergency preparedness is that you have to regularly check your emergency lighting system. For whatever reason, you lose electricity, you still have to have those emergency lighting. And if you're trying to evacuate a building, oh, how important it would be to have those things. Emergency generator, I listed the federal tags there as well, where you can find more information about those. How about a warning system? Most of us have gone away from the overhead pager systems that we used to have back in the day. So how are you going to do a warning system? How is everybody in your building going to be able to know that something's going on? You're evacuating the building. We have a huge building. It's over 200,000 square feet. And so how am I going to get the word out quickly? So we use a platform called OnShift, and that's how we do our scheduling. But the nice thing about OnShift is that we can send out messages, and it sends out a text message that we could push out immediately to our staff. We also use a program called Call Fire, and we can quickly record a message, and then it starts calling. It'll call all the residents, and it'll call all the staff members as well. So we have both of those things available to us. And let's write that in OnShift. And the other one is Call Fire. So that'll send out messages for you. Okay. Designating an assembly site. So if you are evacuating and people are going to come in and help because you've sent out this message saying, hey, we need some assistance evacuating the residents. Where do you want those people to go so that they're not roaming all over the building looking for you to find out how do you need them, where do you want them? So having this assembly site, that's where you set up your incident command, and then that's where everyone's going to report to find out where do they go next. At the end of all the chaos, who's going to give the all clear? If the firemen or other emergency management people are on site, typically they're the ones, but if they're not there, because if there's a tornado, they're helping, number one, most of them are going to the hospital, but they're helping other places. And so there may not be somebody there. It has to be someone who has truly checked and made sure there are no hazards left before we can give an all clear, and then we can come back to the building after evacuating. Always a planning ahead for people who need extra assistance. Snow chains for tires, snow cleats for staff. They're very inexpensive and just good to have available. Contracting with a local car rental for a four-wheel drive. So not related to evacuating, but just 2 weeks ago when we had the ice storm, we rented a four-wheel drive vehicle so that we could get staff to work. Many of them live in apartment complexes that don't ever clear the lots, or maybe they live up on a hill and there was no way they could get out of their home. So we were able to go pick up people. You know, I'm not a nurse, but I need nurses here. I can't do what they do, so I went and picked them up. Having staff go kits, like make sure you have a first aid kit and extra water in your van or car, however it is that you're transporting people when you're evacuating. Leaving security in place at your building once it's been evacuated. Many moons ago, there was a tornado that hit a nursing home in Tulsa, and the administrator at the time had shared with me that one of their challenges was that once they had evacuated the building, that people were trying to break in afterward. And so just calling a security company, if you don't have your own security on staff, but calling a security company to have this agreement that, hey, if we have an emergency that affects our building, can we call on you to send someone out, to man the building? Are you able to leave a message on your facility phone, like on the voicemail of your facility phone, to notify others of your location, or how can they contact you to find out more information? A resident to go kit. Having the ability to print out face sheets, a picture of the resident and their emergency contact information, very important, their history and physical, if they have a DNR or advanced directive, obviously their MAR, their TAR, and then what allergies. A list of their meds and supplies, if they have a trach, all those supplies, colostomy supplies, oxygen with tubing, glucometer, lancets, needles, whatever they need for their CPAP, wheelchairs, walkers, dentures, eyeglasses, hearing aids, a prosthesis, a change of clothes, at least to get them through that next night. Incontinence supplies, again, you can't assume the other home has enough to provide for your resident. Send a large bag with them for accumulation of their laundry so that you can make sure you get the laundry back. And then again, transport backup oxygen separate from your residence. When can you return? Who's going to make that decision? If you have a tornado or a flood or a fire, I encourage you ahead of time to find out a reputable restoration company that you can call when needed. They are tremendously helpful. This is what they do. They're experts at it, and you don't have to worry about how are you going to get this mess cleaned up. And they'll help you with even filing insurance claims and things like that if that's what's needed. But it allows you to focus on where are my residents, where are my staff. Do you evacuate pets? We tell our residents if they have a pet, and so of course this is mostly in my assisted living, but they have to have pet carriers. And we tell them we evacuate people first, and if their time allows, we go back for pets. So you have to make some tough decisions, and your head has to rule over your heart, and that's tough, but you have to do what's going to be for the greater good. The staff need to know that you are looking out for them too during this event, because you obviously want to keep your staff. can they temporarily work at that other home while repairs are ongoing? They're still your staff, they're still taking care of your residents. You continue to pay them, and the other home, just tracks they showed up, here's how many hours, they were here, so that they at least still have a job. Because that other home, again, you can't assume they have enough staff to take care of your residents. Preventing building damage, trim trees away from the building ahead of time. I mentioned about in 1993, yeah, the Catoosa tornado hit the nursing home, 4 of their 6 wings. So they kind of had the wagon wheel with the nurses station in the middle and the hallways going off from there. 4 of their 6 wings were destroyed. Fortunately, they had warning and they were able to start evacuating prior to the tornado coming. But it took them 6 months to reopen. So you think about, what are you going to do for 6 months? That's a huge loss of revenue. And again, try to take care of your staff, make sure there's a place where they can go. In February of 21, of course, Winter Storm Uri was a big headache. There were 7 million people without water. Very difficult for me to fathom. 5 million people without power. If you do utilize the Red Cross shelter, they require that you send staff. They won't just take your folks without someone coming. And with any emergency, you have to report to the state and the local emergency management. We'll talk a little bit more about an 1135 waiver. So the typical rule is you have 24 hours to report when you have this emergency going on. An 1135 waiver allows you to take care of the residents, focus on what you need to do. If you have to go past that 24-hour requirement, the 1135 waiver will cover you, but you have to have that in place. In December, why there has a 2 there, it should have been 20, there was in 21, there was a multi-state tornado that hit at 7:24 p.m. The point being, at 7:24 p.m., how prepared are you to take care of a tornado? There was a nursing home in Arkansas, 86 beds, 65 residents in-house. 2 of them, unfortunately, were killed and 5 injured. All of them had to be evacuated. The tornado collapsed the roof and broke all the windows. Of course, flooding incurred. The staff brought the residents to the hall, covered them with pillows and blankets, and placed mattresses in front of the exit doors. The residents lost everything. So that's another thing to think about. They come to live at your nursing home. They live in this room. What they had was all they had in the world, and how devastating for them. And how are you going to deal with all the emotional trauma that occurs, and just making sure they're going to have clothes and things that they need afterward. Who can you reach out to help with those things? The staff stayed there in that Arkansas home despite the risks to their own homes. I always think that's a kind of folks you want to have on your team. So this is pictures from that tornado in Arkansas. Very devastating. There were wildfires in December 21 in Colorado. 42 residents were evacuated to 4 different facilities. Other communities brought vans to help. And of course, families were called after everyone was out. In our transfer agreements that we have with other nursing homes, we talk about how we have 3 vans available that we could bring. So even if I don't have a bed available for them to bring residents to me, I can still use a van to go over and help transport those folks if they had to evacuate. So in December 21, there were 500 structures destroyed. 6 of them were a nursing home or assisted living communities that were evacuated. And even hospitals had to be evacuated. So when you think about 6 nursing homes all in that same county, all had to be evacuated, they had to have agreements with homes that were outside of their county. in order to find a place to take their residents. One of the unfortunate things that can happen during any emergency is that staff, when they get nervous, sometimes talk when they shouldn't or say things that they shouldn't. And there was one assisted living employee that literally just threw the home under the bus during the interview with the news crew and that person didn't have all the information. So communicating with your staff is important so they know that you are in contact with emergency management, that you are in contact with the fire department, you are in contact with the health department, whoever that you're talking to, and you're making plans about how you're going to do this evacuation, that you have called other homes to say, hey, do you have any beds? You have called families to say, hey, can you come get your mom? Communicate with your staff so that they know you have this under control. Leave it up to you to be the one to talk to any media. Because if you don't, they're going to make it up. They're going to say, man, they knew about this. This was coming. And they didn't do anything. And there we go. What's interesting in this Boulder County, they provided evacuation calls to people that registered with them. That's kind of a neat system they have. Any questions about evacuating, please put those in the chat and we'll address those as we go. We're going to shift to sheltering in place. So sheltering in place, also keeping a list of everybody in the building, good to have. Having a warning system, still the same. Review different potential situations with your employees in advance. I encourage you to invite your families. Have a meeting where you talk about your emergency plan. One of the worst things that can happen is that you've got families in your face saying, what are you going to do for my mom? What are you going to do for my mom? You don't have time for that. So if they know that you have this under control, you have a plan, provide them with a copy of your plan, put it on your website, then invite them to a meeting where they can ask questions ahead of time. What are you going to do if this occurs? What are you going to do if that occurs? That way they can be helpful and not a hindrance. Assign specific duties in advance, and who's going to be that person who locks the doors, provides security. Always train alternates. Donations management. If you have an incident occur and you are sheltering in place, you might need some things. So thinking ahead of time about if people bring donations, people bring water, maybe people bring blankets, whatever it is that you need, and you've maybe reached out through media that you could use these items, where are all those things going to go? So just so that not when they come in the door, you're like, I don't know, throw it over there. It needs to be organized. Involve families in the drill. Use a newsletter to invite them. See if there's a way I can move this. There we go. It's actually part of the regulations that you have to communicate your plan. One idea is to have a closed Facebook page. Putting information just in bullet points about the emergency plan in the admission packet can be very helpful. In Oklahoma, we have the Good Samaritan Act. The Good Samaritan Act says a licensed person who voluntarily helps without compensation in an emergency situation would not face liability for something that could be considered willfully wrong. So I'll give an example. It's the nurse who's driving by and they see this car on fire and they stop, they help get the driver out of the car before before they get burned. And in the act of pulling them out of the car, that person gets a scratch on their leg, which then becomes infected. And now, a foot gets amputated or something. I'm exaggerating, but the point is that person cannot sue that nurse because of their foot amputation, because that nurse was acting on a voluntary basis without compensation because of this emergency situation. So same thing if a nurse or a physician comes to your facility, they are protected if they're assisting in something unfortunate occurs. Okay, your electronic health record, having offsite data storage. If you are not in the cloud, how are you going to get to your electronic health record in the future? How are you going to care for people on dialysis if the roads are not travelable? If you have people on dialysis, what is your plan? For us here at University Village, we would have to send them to the hospital. Know that nursing homes are not prioritized for restoration of power or gas like a hospital is. It's beyond my thinking, but it's still the case in Oklahoma. One idea that one of the students brought up during this class a few years ago was about having supply tubs on each hallway for quick access. So on each hallway, maybe in a closet, there's this tub and it has flashlights and batteries and whatever, might be something that you might need quickly. Having emergency supply kits and place them in strategic locations. Having a battery-powered radio is very important. Again, you want to practice your plan on a regular basis, obviously upon hire, and then annually thereafter as required. Recruit volunteers and train them, again, especially if you're in a rural community. Review the use of a fire extinguisher and an E-tank, concentrators, and boo bags. Review those things with social services, activities, people that they could be helpful, getting those things for you. And obviously a concentrator is easy to hook up, things like that. But if they've never done it before, then they're having to ask you questions. So the more that people can do without taking up your time, the better, so that you, again, can focus on other things. Find out where you can get dry ice. So dry ice, a 50 pounds of dry ice can keep an 18 cubic refrigerator at temperature for 2 days. Just something to think about. So basically, most of the time they come in a box. You open the box, you set the dry ice in there, and it helps keep your food cold, so you still have food. You obviously don't want to leave somebody in your refrigerator with the dry ice and have them breathing all of that. You can reach out to a local restaurant, because if there is this ice storm and every place is closed, reach out to them. They may have already pulled food for preparation and they're just going to have to throw it away. So see if maybe they have something you could use. Rent a freezer truck if your freezer is down. If you use US Foods as your vendor, they will provide those for you. If you do have pets, you're one of the homes that has pets, make sure you have enough pet food for your pets in case you can't get to the grocery store quickly. I left a website here. There's a company called Agreco that will provide generators. So we'll talk about this more in life safety code, but the regulation says you must have a backup power source. So it doesn't come out and say you have to have a generator. However, unless you live, near a windmill or something else, I don't know what it would be, but having a backup power source, having a generator, and if you needed a generator, you have to have a transfer switch ahead of time. So you want to make sure you have that in place and someone has come and hooked you up for that, so that when the generator gets there, it's literally just connecting it. And an electrician has to set up the generator if you don't have a transfer switch. So finding an electrician at 2 in the morning may not be easy. Be sure you have backup gas for your generator as well, whether it's diesel or if you're on natural gas. Sure, Vanessa. Okay. Emergency preparedness kits. So we have tubs. I've got 2 in my nursing home, one at the skilled desk, one at the long-term care desk. I've got a couple over in assisted living, and then there's one up in our administration area. And so in these kits, I keep a current list of my residents and my employees. So every month, on the first day of the month, I'm running out a new list of my residents and a new list of my employees and keeping it in there. And that employee list has the employee name, their contact information, their emergency contact person, and that person's phone number as well. I keep a current list of my vendors that might be needed. So it has the vendor listed and the phone number and if there's a contact person. Having badges ready for volunteers. You just want to make sure you know who's in your building, what are they doing, and then that way your staff will know as well. Having blank forms of your admission process. So in case you are going to you have a couple of empty beds available where you could take residents from another community, how are you going to do this quick admission to make sure that you're taking care of them properly? If you don't have the info you need, that could be bad. A copy of your emergency plan is in my kit, and I have a list of all my transfer agreements. So transfer agreements, you need to have this memorandum of understanding with other nursing homes, assisted livings, PACE, whatever it is that where you will be working, places where you could transfer residents. Who is willing to take some of your folks if they have empty beds? Who might have, there went Trevor, who might have vehicles available that could help to transfer your folks? I have glow sticks and weather radio and extra batteries and an extra set of master keys so that if we had to get into mechanical closet or whatever during a disaster, we could quickly do all of that. I also have a copy of my missing resident policy. Residents with dementia still know when they see a fire, get out. And if you have somebody who tends to wander anyway, that could be disastrous, especially if it's in the winter or something like that. So anyway, having a copy of your missing resident policy just in case you had to enact it while you were having this disaster. All right, emergency standby power systems. So this is kind of where that need for a generator, it says, you must continue to meet, that's the bold print, you must continue to meet the existing provisions and requirements for your provider type under physical environment conditions participation. So again, that's where it says you must have an essential electrical system, so a backup system so that you can keep going, because our responsibility is to prevent injury or death of our residents. Again, it doesn't quite come out and say, oh, you have to have a generator. I do want you to notice right here, so long-term care facilities required to comply with 2012 edition. There is a 2021 edition of the Life Safety Code. However, for CMS only requires you to be compliant with the 2012 edition of the National Fire Protection Association, the Life Safety Code Manual 101. I encourage you to get one of those. If you ever do any kind of remodeling in your building, maybe you even add on an addition, even just to make sure you are in compliance. That Life Safety Code Manual ends up being like my second Bible anytime we're doing remodeling or anything going on. It's divided between existing communities or existing structure or new structure, meaning if you're adding on something, then you have to come up to certain code. If you were already in existence, then you only have to come up to that code. So it divides it out. It obviously has nursing homes. It has other types of buildings as well. If you want one that is specific to healthcare only, that's the NFPA 99. That's the one that CMS uses, and NFPA 99 Healthcare Facilities Code. Making sure you have emergency telephone numbers, a calling tree system in place in case you needed to get a hold of your employees. There is a company called Notify Quick that says they'll do it for you if you don't have something already in place. We utilize through AT&T, it's called disaster routing. If my phone system goes down at University Village, then I call AT&T and say I need to implement my disaster routing, which means my main phone number, the phone number at the nurse's station, will then roll over to a cell phone that I keep up at the front desk. And so then that way we're not losing calls. Reminding your staff to assume control, stay calm, prevent panic seems easy, but some people don't handle these type of situations well. So just kind of reminding them to breathe. Utility and water shutoffs. I keep a map of where all the utility shutoffs and all the water shutoffs are in our building. Again, I can quickly hand that map to the firemen or whoever might come from emergency management, and then they can help me with those tasks in case something does need to be shut off. A reminder that if you shut off the gas, only the gas company can restore your service. You cannot turn your own gas back on. So that could be bad if you are dependent on gas for heat or other things. So just remember that. Don't shut off the gas unless you have to. Whereas, electric and water are a little bit easier to turn back on. When do you need to implement a fire watch? We'll talk about that more when we talk about life safety code, but basically a fire watch is if your fire system is down, you may have to implement a fire watch so that you're still, somebody is focused on just that and you're still protected from fires. If you have AC or heat failure during a power failure, what are you going to do? Again, hopefully your generator provides that for you, and again, being sure you have gas for your generator. We have a contract with a diesel company here in Tulsa so that in case I do have to go on using the generator here, that they will come every 24 hours to fill it back up for us. If your community is near wooded areas, you're somebody who needs to have something quick ahead of time where you can seal windows, doors, vents with plastic and tape them up. And I encourage you to cut out what you need ahead of time and just have it where it's easily accessible. People know where those things are located, so you can just grab and go. What are you going to do if you have some injuries and maybe you have some deaths? In the unfortunate case of what happened in Colorado and what happened in Arkansas, where the hospitals had to evacuate as well, what if you have to handle your injuries in-house and you have to handle that death in-house because maybe the funeral home can't get to you? Having a body bag available or whatever your plan is, where you might be able to triage all of these things. Psychological first aid. So we'll talk about that for just a moment. The size of the psychological footprint exceeds the size of the medical footprint by a factor of 10. Meaning, when a disaster occurs, what happens to somebody psychologically is 10 times bigger than what may happen physically to them. Back in 1995 in Tokyo, there was a sarin attack. 12 people were killed, 50 people were injured. 1,000 of them suffered temporary vision problems. When they followed back up with these people afterwards, 72% of them said they started using sleeping pills. 57% said they started having nightmares and flashbacks, and 77% said they used alcohol to calm their nerves. Closer to home, the Emer building, back on April 19th, there were 168 deaths. 853 people had physical injuries, but 8,868 people received counseling after that incident. During Katrina, 14% of the victims state they now have symptoms of severe mental illness. 21% have mild to moderate, and 8% said they considered suicide. 1 in 6 met the diagnostic criteria for PTSD. 49% developed anxiety or mood disorders. During Hurricane Irma, more than 6 million people had to be evacuated. can even fathom what it took to make that happen. But when disaster strikes, our body revs up to solve the problems, and a lot of people they can feel trapped by everything they saw. Maybe they saw their closest friend at work might have been injured or worse, or seeing something happen to a resident, could be traumatic for them, and so causing them maybe to have PTSD. So mental rehearsal is when you kind of talk to your staff ahead of time about, guys, if it is unfortunate, that a tornado were to hit the building and there might be injuries, something to think about ahead of time. And so you kind of just talk through it and you ask them, gosh, guys, what kind of feelings, might occur when this happens, and just let them get it out, let them talk about it. In mental rehearsal, they can think through it ahead of time. My encouragement to you is to reach out to your hospice chaplains, or if they have bereavement counselors, or maybe a local church might send a pastor. We kind of reach out to these people ahead of time and just say, hey, I'm working on my emergency preparedness plan. God forbid something were to happen. Would you be willing to come in and provide maybe some reassurance and if able, psychological counseling, if you have a contract with somebody who could do that. All right. When you are sheltering in place and you have damage to your building, it is so important that you lock your building and that you really are controlling who is coming in and out. And because looters know that you have drugs, and it's very unfortunate, but they could try to break in because you're vulnerable. All right, subsistence needs, one of the requirements. So you need to have agreements so that you have food, water, medical, and pharmaceutical backup. Who's going to bring you food? Who can provide water for you? Who can bring medicines or medical supplies if your pharmacy gets, hit by a tornado? What's your backup plan? Having alternate sources of energy to maintain the temperatures in the building, obviously the emergency lighting, your fire protection system, your extinguishing system, the alarm systems, sewage and waste disposal. When we had floods, oh gosh, I guess it's now been 2 years ago in July, when the river started rising, and we didn't know, if it was going to flood in our area or not, because we were right by the Arkansas River. The casino that's very close to us, they had sewage and waste disposal that came up in the casino, and we are connected to their system because we're very close to them. And so we were watching that very closely, because that could have presented a whole other set of problems. Consider how much food, water, backup supplies you need for your residents, your staff, visitors, or volunteers that are in the building. So think about what that number is. The regulation says you must have 3 days required for your long-term care residents, but they recommend 7. So you have to have 3 days worth of food for all of your long-term care residents. Again, recommending 7. Think about if you are a community that has a basement, not storing things in the basement if you could be possibly prone to a flood down there. One community told me that when their electricity went down, they couldn't wash the residents' clothes or the excuse me, the sheets and things, and they didn't realize that they were literally going around to every employee going, hey, do you have any quarters, so that they could go down the street and wash everything at the laundromat. IT, having a backup for your server. How are you going to continue to pay your employees if your computers are down? So just thinking ahead of time to have a plan so that you can still process payroll. Servers must stay cool. So, keeping your server healthy if you have a server in the building for all your computers, because power surges can burn their internal components. There is a company called Agility Recovery Solutions, and they say, hey, you have a disaster, we'll be there within 48 hours. We'll deliver power, technology, blah, 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 $341 a month, but it's interesting that service is out there. If you're someone like University Village, we have flat roofs. And so I really have to pay attention to my snow and ice load for my roof, but I need to know what is that? What is that load? What can it handle ahead of time? And if I have to have a plan, if somebody's got to go on that roof and remove the snow, just making sure I don't forget that step. Carbon monoxide poisoning. So the fire department has detectors if you don't already have them installed in your building. If you have an IT room at your facility, making sure that it's a chemical fire extinguisher. And again, at the end of every disaster, you're going to report to state and local emergency management. I encourage you, when a disaster happens, immediately reach out to your local emergency management. Even if they can't help you right away, they will get to you eventually, and they can be so helpful because this is what they do. That's what they're there for. They can put you in contact with people, or even if they can make a call for you. They have connections at PSO, ONG, OG&E, that we don't have, and they can help you get back online. For us, we have Cox for our phone system and our internet. And if we were to have a disaster, we can call Cox and they could put us on a special list where they will get us back up and going quickly because we are a nursing home. All right, communication plan. You must have a written plan. How are you going to communicate what's going on at your place with healthcare providers, state and local public health departments? How are you going to coordinate and get information out to the families? So here in Tulsa County, our MERC, our emergency management folks, they actually do what they call redundant communications drills, where they will send us out and say, hey, the drill has begun, and we have to contact them via text message, fax machine, email, phone call. So we are doing this redundancy. We're contacting them 4 different ways just to make sure we are able to get in touch with them during a disaster. If you have a ham radio, the MERCs will actually provide a ham radio operator for you. Maybe you already know someone. But think about that ahead of time, calling them, and then they can be in communication with the emergency management folks. Transfer agreements. Again, we talked about having them with other long-term care facilities. If you have a disaster that affects your county, remember that everybody's fighting for the same resources. So having as many transfer agreements as you can and being sure that you have some with places that are further out, and then obviously places close by. Having an agreement with a local hospital and transportation services. So like for us, we have an account with a taxi cab company. We also have an agreement with medical transport companies that could pick up people with have a lift van, things like that. Always having maps showing 2 routes to those other facilities that you have those transfer agreements with. So with my transfer agreement attached to it are directions on how to get to that place 2 different ways. They're just stapled together. Earthquakes and bombs. For a while, Oklahoma passed California for having the highest number of earthquakes in a year. But if you are in a community that could be susceptible to damage from earthquakes, it's drop, cover, and hold. So you drop to the floor, take cover under something sturdy. If there is nothing sturdy to get under, then seek cover against an interior wall. Protect your head and neck with your arms, and then you hold on until the shaking stops. Ahead of time, you want to go through your building, make sure that all shelves are fastened well, that mirrors and pictures are fastened well to the wall, because those are the things that could fall and obviously hurt someone. Um, Locking brakes on people's wheelchairs is going to be important. Safety locks on upper cabinets. If you're outside, stand in an open area. If you're on the road, drive away from an over underpass and stop. After the shaking stops, be cautious opening cabinets. There could be aftershocks. You definitely want to check your building for any cracks that might occur that may now cause, an uneven ceiling or walls to lean. If you have any water lines that break, you want to shut the water off as quick as you can. Yeah, don't use toilets as potable water unless you purify it. In my emergency preparedness kit, I have these purification pills, super cheap. It tells you exactly how to do it. You put one pill in the gallon of water and then it purifies it for you. Obviously, you can boil water, but there are different things out there, and I encourage you to do some Googling to find just some easy ways. We found these bags of water, again, super cheap, that they last for 5 years. So I keep water, and then we also have an agreement with Pepsi Cola, because the company here in Tulsa, they will sign a water agreement with you that says we will provide enough water for your residents and your staff, and we'll bring it out daily. But just to sign the agreement was like $250 a year. And my thought is, you're doing this with every single community in town. When are you going to get to me if I truly had a problem? And are you going to have enough for everybody that you have all these agreements with? So we called Pepsi, and they're like, oh yeah, we can provide water, and obviously you're just paying for whatever you get from them. So anyway, that's what we did. Bomb threats. So fortunately, 98% of threats are hoaxes. Most of them tend to occur during the day in public places. There's long detonation times. It's very rare to find some kind of written message. Your staff are most likely the ones that are going to notice that there's something out of place. Having updated blueprints of your building is very important for those emergency personnel when they show up. And you want to get as much information from the caller as possible. So, you have to think somebody who's going to do a bomb threat isn't quite all there anyway. And statistically, these people will tell you more than you think they will. But things you want to try to figure out as much as you can is the gender of the person, approximate age, listen to the caller's voice. Are there any background sounds? Are you picking up on an accent at all? And then ask them things like, well, when and where is this bomb going to explode? What kind of bomb is it? What does it look like? What will cause it to explode? Did you place the bomb? Why? What is your name? And where are you calling from? And just, again, trying to get as much information as you can. And we tell our staff, if you pick up the phone, you answer the phone, and someone says that, they have placed a bomb in your building, you are writing down as much as you can, while with your other hand, you're signaling someone to call 911. Maybe 6 or 7 years ago, so we are right next door to a university, Oral Roberts University, and then also there is a Jewish community not too far from us. And this was a time when there were a lot of bomb threats nationwide on different places of worship for Jewish people anyway. So there was a bomb threat at this Jewish community. And so one of the things that administrator shared was that he said, they quickly walked the building and noticed a trash can that was out of place, like it's never there. They were able to find the device and able to tell the bomb squad when they showed up. But it was interesting that the staff, when they took the time to go, oh my gosh, I didn't notice it this morning, but now that I'm trying to be specific, I see that trash can was out of place. So anyway, that happened there. Power outages. Again, your electronic health record. Hopefully, you're hosted on the web. That's always best case scenario, or in the cloud. Having at least one computer and one printer connected to your emergency power system. So if your generator is not, big enough to run your whole entire building, think about ahead of time what needs to be on that generator. Obviously, emergency lighting, your nurse call system, but having at least one computer and one printer so that you could print out face sheets or medical records, things like that. Talk to your internet provider. I mentioned this earlier about we can call Cox about being an essential service so that we're a higher priority for restoration. Freezer. Okay, a freezer half full can stay cold for 24 hours. A full freezer for 48 hours. A refrigerator, for 4 hours. One of the things obviously you want to do is you're going to make a list for everything you need for that meal, and you go in once and you tell the staff, think about what you're going to need, because we're not going in and out, because you've got to keep that door shut as much as you can. Moving items closer together keeps things cold as well. Having boxed or canned milk as a backup could be very important. Contract with a water company, and then again, freezer truck via your supplier. You want to move your medicines, those that have to stay cool, pack them with ice or, a bag of frozen vegetables. Unplug or turn off three-phase equipment if you're able to prior to the power coming back on. So if you're in an area where there's power outages going on, what can happen is that as the system's trying to come back on through your electric company, that three-phase equipment could burn up, cause a fire if it's trying to come on, go off, and doesn't get to turn back on properly. All right, vehicle and downed power lines. So if there is a down power line when you're like something, telephone pole falls or whatever, the electrical pole, while you're in the car, stay in the car if possible. If that car is on fire, you want to jump out of your car. So the gentleman from PSO was the one who provided this information, but he said if there is a power line and it's on the ground and it's raining, whatever, he says, jump out with both feet together and shuffle instead of picking up your feet to take steps so that you don't become that path for the electrical current. Obviously, we want to report the down power line as quickly as possible. And the fastest way to report any power outage is with the app. So PSO ONG said that's the quickest way. However, there's contact information there in case you need to contact them a different way. Extreme temperatures during power outage. So if you are short-staffed during ice, snow, roads are closed, things like that, it's important to cross-train people. One of the things we did here was like social services activities, myself, anyone clerical in the business office, things like that. My marketing team, we all trained to be certified feeders so that at least we could assist with some of those folks that don't need as much assistance as people that may be at risk for aspiration or other things. So at least we can still help. And then having universal workers, several homes, are going to that, where the housekeepers are also trained to be CNAs so that during a time when maybe you're short-staffed, they could help out as needed. If your electricity is out, it's important to have an indoor thermometer so that you're keeping track of the temperatures in the building. Warm beverages obviously will warm a body. Cold beverages will keep them cool. Having cold washcloths to hand out can help. Having fans just to move the air. When it's hot out, you want to obviously decrease physical activity. If it's cold out, increase physical activity. Close off unoccupied rooms in the buildings, cover the windows and the glass doors to help keep temperatures correct. So the regulation says that if your building is between 80 and 84 degrees, you can temporarily use fans as you're working to get your air back on. But once your building or a section of your building hits 85 degrees, you must evacuate that portion of the building. Obviously, we want to check the temperature of the building between 3:30 and 5:30 in the afternoon, because that tends to be when it's the hottest part of the day, and don't rely just on a room thermostat. Your goal is to keep your building between 71 and 81 degrees, and it can't go below 68 degrees. Once a section of your building goes below 68, you must evacuate that section of the building. Workplace violence or armed intruder. If there's a suspicious person, you want to note their height, weight, age, race, sex, what clothes are they wearing, do they have their hands in their pocket. You're going to call 911 and give as many details as you can. If you're able to have a code where you can say Dr. Strong is in the building, or maybe it's code gray for some of you, but we would do a text message through our on-shift system that I told you about to people, so that they would know there is a suspicious person, so that they can be on alert and they can start moving residents and staff to the closest safe place. If the assailant is armed, you want to lock or barricade the door. Use heavy furniture. If you're in a resident room, which in the nursing home, obviously there's not locks on the doors, and so they say that if the person's in that hall, you want to close the door and then shove a dresser, the bed, anything you can up against that door. Because typically what happens is, again, this person isn't all there, and they are on a mission, and a crazy mission. But as they're going through the building, if it takes them too much time to try to get into a room, they're just going to keep moving and go to the next room. So again, that's just statistically. You want to be sure you turn off your cell phone when you're in that room, because you don't want that person thinking there's someone in there. If staff are arguing, like, oh, they get scared and they just freeze. You want to try to move as many people as possible as quickly away from any kind of armed assailant. A time may come where you have to go. If you can't convince that person to go with you, you have to go, because you're no good to the rest of the staff and those residents if both of you are gone. Okay, if it's a just workplace argument, you have a couple of staff that are arguing, the best thing is to ask them both to leave, but keep your voice calm. Do not try to break up a physical fight yourself. I left you a URL there, a site where this is one of the best videos I've ever seen. It's great to show your staff. It's called Run, Hide, Fight. It actually shows a person with a gun coming in the building and doing damage. And so it goes through the scenario of the first thing you should do is you should run. And if you can't get out because that person's, down the hall or whatever, then you hide. Again, talking about how you use heavy furniture, get under something, turn off the light, turn off your cell phone. And then last case scenario, if you cannot protect yourself, then you need to be prepared to fight. He literally talks about, pick up a stapler, pick up a chair, and you have got to be prepared to use those things. Because if you don't, that person's just going to keep going through the building and, possibly killing people. Anyway, it's a great video. It's short, but it's good. Active shooter, get out. So when you're going to exit quickly, leave all your belongings. Nothing is worth taking. You need to protect your life, encourage others to go with you. Hide out in an inconspicuous place, cover yourself, remain quiet, turn off the light to the room. Keep out, try to lock, deadbolt, heavy furniture, even piling up lots of small things can add up to enough to maybe keep the door from being able to get open. And then take out again as the last resort. When law enforcement arrives, keep your hands over your head and visible. They say don't yell, point, he's over there. Don't attempt to ask questions. Don't They cannot stop and worry about the people that may have already been shot. They are there to take out the assailant. So let them do their job, and then the emergency people can then come in and provide emergency services. Don't make any quick moves. All right, flooding. Most flood deaths are due to flash floods. When there is a flood, you should treat all water like it's contaminated. So boiling the water, adding chlorine, iodine. If you're able, turn off all the utilities, disconnect electrical appliances, but don't touch if you are wet or in standing water. A couple of great sites to find out more about contaminated water or just to get alerts. So I encourage all my staff to have a weather app on their phone. Weather apps tend to follow you where you're at. So if you're at your home, it'll give you alerts that would be close to your home, or if you're at work, same thing. The Weather Channel is a good one. And there's obviously others out there. A local news station is another great place to download their app for weather. Mold. Something that was wet for 2 days really needs to go outside because mold can grow even when you can't see it. Wash any kind of cloth item in hot water. When you're cleaning a hard surface, use a 1 to 10 bleach solution to get rid of the mold. And when you are cleaning those things, you need to be wearing rubber boots and gloves, goggles, an N95 mask, open windows and doors. You want to make sure that you're getting lots of fresh air. And then afterward, cleanse it with, rinse with clean water, and then allow the item to dry. Wildfires, being sure you have garden hoses that are ready and long enough to reach all areas of your building and grounds. You want to soak the ground as much as you can before that fire reaches you. Regularly clean the leaves on the ground, gutters, downspouts, roofs. Close off all fresh air intakes and set them to recirculation of indoor air only. And then minimize any kind of indoor air pollution, like don't vacuum or use floor polishing machines during that time. Having maps with alternate routes away from the building, because obviously the fire may be blocking one way. Hazardous material, waste spills. If you live near a train track or refinery or maybe a warehouse, this might affect you. Having controlled access to the building, again, you want to open the doors as few times as possible, making sure that you have PPE available. We've all been through that for other reasons, having PPE available, but eyewear, respirator, chemical resistant gloves are important. Close all the windows, turn off the HVAC system, similar to what we talked about with the wildfire, except that you're calling in a hazmat team. And then after any type of disaster, 2 people should check out the building. That way, in case something happens to one of them, you've got another person there who can assist or run back for help. And then make a list of anything that you find with any of the hazards that we've talked about today. Keep a list and be sure you're addressing those before you consider your building all clear. Cyber attacks. Oh my goodness, ransomware is just rampant today. Teaching your staff that when they get an email and it just doesn't look right, don't open it. Someone you don't know it comes from, don't open it. Respond to a ransomware attack, don't ignore it. You have to report the crime to law enforcement and report to affected individuals within 60 days. So if someone gets into your electronic health record, let's say, or your payroll system, so all the people that their information is now out there, you have to notify all of them within 60 days. All right. Emerging infectious diseases. So I actually have an emergency preparedness notebook. And in my notebook, which again, I usually show you if you were here in person with me. But my first section is my hazard vulnerability assessment. So what are naturally occurring events that could affect me? Technological events, human related, hazardous materials. And then I have a copy of my insurance for my business interruption. Again, it just lets me get to it quickly. My second section is my actual emergency plan. And I show proof of my training on that plan, and it's all there together. I have a map of my all the shutoffs, my utility shutoffs, and then a map of my campus, and then I have a emergency vendor contact list. The next section is policies. So my emergency preparedness policies, my backup plan for payroll, and my 1135 waiver request. The next section is my subsistence needs, the water contract, my 7-day disaster menu, again, vendor list for those needs. Next section is on evacuation. I've got my resident tracking forms. I have all my transfer agreements. And then my IMSA taxi and lift service agreements. Next section's on sheltering in place, my assembly area map, emergency supplies, what I have in my emergency supply closet. Next section's communication plan, posting information to my website and Facebook page, working with the media, my alternate and primary means of communication, my staff contact information. Next section's emergency power, with my generator schematic, instructions on how to start my generator manually, and then my reliability letter from O&G. So when state comes in, I just hand them my notebook because it is all there. If you would like a list of my table of contents that I just read to you, if you will put your email in the chat, I will send it to you. Or actually, at the end of this presentation, you'll see my email address. So if you'll send me an email, I will send you all of this, including my HVA, the Hazard Vulnerability Assessment. Then that way you can just tweak it to fit your home. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. I have a whole separate notebook on COVID, as I'm sure you all do as well. Obviously, COVID has just been a nightmare for all of us, and we all keep hoping that it's going to be over soon. There are some great tools out there to help you if you do need some better information. And so on this page that you're looking at, there's just lots of cool tools that I encourage you to go to, again, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Today, so just some stats on Oklahoma. To date, in Oklahoma alone, there have been 1,010,554 cases of COVID. Yesterday, there were 1,047 new cases. Today, in all of Oklahoma, there are 14,994 active cases. We've had 14,152 deaths. And today in Oklahoma, there are 1,067 people in the hospital due to COVID. 221 of them are in ICU. So this isn't over. Just some stats on the page there, talking about how highly contagious Omicron was. So in 2021, how many nursing home residents, and then look at January 22. So it went from 4,000 to 32,000, and then staff from 5,000 to 57,000. So just horrible numbers there. Dealing with the media. My encouragement to you is to designate 1 or 2 people who will speak to the media, having like a public relations officer on your team. And the fire chief can assist. If it's a fire and the fire chief is there, typically that's the person who's going to speak to the media. But if it's any other disaster, or if it's a big fire that's affected more than just you, then you need to have people that are trained on how to talk to the media. And you train the staff, don't talk to the media. Because sometimes when people are stressed, they often want to tell their story. Don't allow interviews with residents, obviously. And having a fact sheet about your home ready so that you can hand that to the media person. Like for me, it would say, this is University Village. We have 327 residents. We've been in business for 52 years, but I have 225 employees, things like that. Give them some good things to be able to say about your home, but it just opens that line of communication with the media person. You want to clearly outline what steps that you are taking. You want the public to know that you are taking steps to take care of these vulnerable adults. Give them updates on your progress, whether you guys agree to text each other or call or email. There is a rule in HIPAA that says you cannot give out the doctor's name without their permission. So even though it's awesome to be able to say, Dr. So-and-so is on site, it helps the public feel better, right? That you have this medical expertise there helping. But anyway, just know that there's a rule in HIPAA that says you can't give out a doctor's name. One of the biggest things you want to do is you don't want to assign blame. Like, I've been calling this contractor to come and fix blah, blah, blah. Don't assign blame. It just doesn't help in your situation. You know how the media is. They will come and they will find the person who is just not aware of really what's going on, but they're looking for that emotional story. They're just looking for a story. And so don't give it to them. Give them the facts. All right. CERT, Citizen or Community Emergency Response Team. There's some great programs in Oklahoma where people can learn how to be an educated volunteer about what to do during a disaster, so that when you're not at work, you can help other places, but definitely you'll be more prepared about what to do at your own place. FEMA has obviously a comprehensive preparedness guide, and so there is the website there. And what FEMA says, the number one pitfall of any plan is that they're too long, so don't make them long. Keep them short and to the point, easy to read. I talked about how the state plan has those really nice checklists that's divided by department, makes it so much easier. And the second pitfall is remembering that you are a diverse community. And so do you have steps in your plan for the people that can't hear well, the people that won't be able to hear that fire alarm going off? Maybe they're deaf. What are you going to do for the people that can't see well? And obviously, again, the people that need full assistance. And so just making sure you look at your entire community and that there are steps in your plan for everyone. Here are some great resources. Obviously, Department of Homeland Security has some great material available. American Red Cross, Oklahoma Department of Emergency Management, and there's some YouTube videos. So this one, Don't Sweat It, that I have listed here is specific to a nursing home and about a tornado. It's a great video. Anyway, there's some good stuff out there. So my information is listed at the bottom of this page, as you can see. So again, if you are interested in anything that we talk about today, if you'll send me your email address, then I will be happy to share those things with you. Because if you're, protecting folks, then we're all better off. Let me. I'm going to, I think there was another handout. Oh. One second. What did I do with that, Vanessa? Okay, so you did receive I'm going to get there. I apologize. This is the one. This is the HVA, just showing really quick. It has some instructions on how to do it. But basically, you're looking at natural disasters and you're going to determine what is the probability that a tornado would happen here at University Village. Is it low, moderate, or high? Well, it's high. What is the human impact? What's the possibility that someone could be hurt or die? Well, unfortunately, with tornadoes, possibility is there. What about physical damage to the building? What about, is it going to interrupt your services potentially? Thinking about the power will be down or other things. How prepared am I? High, moderate, low, me and my staff. What about internal response? Can we effectively, quickly get to the resources and be effective? And then community mutual aid. What is the probability that there's someone in the community that can help provide services? So is that high, moderate, or low? Anyway, you do it for every single one of these um, naturally occurring events. Then it's got technological events, human hazards, the mass casualty, civil disturbance, bomb threats. Then there's hazardous materials. And then at the end, it gives you this summary that then tells you, what is your vulnerability risk? And so it kind of helps you look at and go, wow, these are some of the things that I need to do some more training on. So it's kind of nice to have. Anyway, I will send you that blank form, and that will save you some time there on that. Okay. So Z, this is the end of emergency preparedness. So we are going to it is 10:05. Let's take a 15-minute break.
Okay, I'll stop the recording.